was the first.
Yeah, I just remember another thing. You know, the American students from the Hebrew Union College and the Jewish Theological Seminary that had begun then their program of the year in Israel, I think in their junior year. And when the American students first came, I think there were 5, they came immediately to check in with us. And Maurice offered to, give them hospitality. Did they want to come as a group? And anytime they wanted it. Oh, no. Oh, that's just exactly what they didn't want. They did not want to be known as American. Oh, they wanted to be integrated and to be part of the Israeli group. And just remember that they were to be included in all the Israelis.
Very sensitive of them, right away.
But lo and behold, the Israelis weren't ready to include them in the corporate.
What were the Israeli students like?
Students like?
Compared to what you experienced here?
Well, they had just known army life. They didn't know anything about humanities. They didn't know anything about any other life other than being in the army. And there were all kinds of adjustments to make, including social adjustments. But lo and behold, the tail end of their stay, like 3/4 through, when these American students were frustrated about not being accepted, as it were, and then they made a proposition to Maurice that they would like to come and meet with him
as a group.
And share their views and their experiences and that kind of thing. But I remember that part of it. Anyhow, from there we moved then to our place on our Lazarov. And by that time, there was already talk about finding a house for
Helen.
And
but in the meantime, it was in your apartment.
In the meantime, and there was this big, long room. So while they were looking for a place, a house to buy, we had concerts once a week at our place when just announcements were made, and by word of mouth, they knew that a concert would take place. Now, these young people, they were not as young as young people coming into a university here, because they had been in the army for years. They were really mature people already. Many of them in their late 20s when they were starting their university life. They had never heard or knew that there were long-playing records that time. They hadn't heard music while they were in the army. And so it was an enormous surprise to them to learn that there was such a thing as long playing. And
so were the concerts record concerts or mute live?
No.
They were record concerts.
Record concerts. We had a record.
So you were introducing them to this repertoire.
We brought 90 records with us, and we became acquainted with another lady by the name of Joan Greenberg from New York, who had come to teach at the university, and she had brought some 80-some records. So we had, a lot of records to share, to play. And some 90 students came every single Wednesday. We had
what an insight to bring the music in.
Students took turns putting the records on, changing them, And but you asked me before
what
students were like, and I have to tell you that they were very formal and I would say distant.
They were distant.
Distant.
They were differently shaped by their experience.
You couldn't relate to them in a personal kind of way. And I just remember that after the concerts, Maurice and I would sit down, and after after they left and would say, I've been relating to students all these years, but I can't make them out. I can't get to know them really. Have a relationship with them, and I don't know what that. When the concert was through, they were very polite. We'd be standing there near the exit door, and each one of them would come by and bow and say Toda Rabbi, Toda Rabbi.
Very formal.
They would eat the special cakes that nobody knew about festive cakes in Jerusalem at that time. I mean, there was nothing to buy. You couldn't make it. The only reason I could have festive cakes was because National Hillel siphoned some food to us for this purpose. And I used to have an exchange relationship with my Ozeret. We call them here maids, but these were Ozeret helpers. And she needed shaman oil, and I needed sugar or flour or something like that. So we'd make exchanges. So I could make these fancy cakes, and imagine they would get chocolate cake with chocolate frosting, and there were no ovens at that time to bake. You baked in what was called a Wundertopf.
Sirpella.
Yeah. It was the big pot with a cover, and you baked it on an oil shemen.
Right,
An oil burner.
Right, an oil burner. And you'd get the shemen from a purveyor who would come down the streets and scream, shemen, 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 and we'd run out. I knew some professors who would run from their offices, leave their classes in order to come out into the street and not miss. Leo Strauss, Professor Leo Strauss was spending that year in Jerusalem, and his place was right across the road from us. And Leo Strauss, whose wife wouldn't be doing anything like this, because she was sort of sickly. And there was Leo Strauss standing there with an oil can. So you'd have it for the week's supply, And so I used to bake these cakes on a Wundertopf on top of this oil burner, and they'd come out high and beautiful. It was amazing. But again, you'd think that the students would be so appreciative of this, but it was all part of the Toda Rabba. And at that point, Maurice has to do something about this. And he found himself, I think, 4 students that he could relate to and who related to him, and so that they saw his confusion and his anxiety and everything, and they became his advisors on how to establish a Hillel for these students on this campus at this time.
He made them his advisors.
So they used to meet every day at Cafe Rechavia for tea at 4:30 or something like that, and they explained to Maurice why he was encountering this kind of behavior on the part of the students. He said, they don't trust you. They don't trust any American who comes over with a free offer. And they were preparing for the time when, along with this free offer, you would come out with the gimmick that you really were expecting from them. And so there was this distance between them. And they persuaded him to have patience with it. In the end, they'd come through. And they did.
They did.
As the months rode on, they not only came through and were relaxed and so forth, but they wound up in the kitchen licking the frosting from the pans.
Which is what they wanted to do right away.
one of the other things that happened during that first couple of years, like I told you, you couldn't buy food or clothing. There just was nothing to buy in. And in the States, there was a big to-do in that early period about sending clothes to
Right, I
Israel.
remember my mother collecting in the 40s. Shoes, she'd collect shoes during the
People
war.
had
and
certain
clothes.
things, stores and individuals, and there were really gobs of clothing that came. And some of our Chicago acquaintances who were also doing this, and they thought, why should we just send stuff to a central place? We could send it to the Pekarskys, and they'll see to it that it gets to the right people.
That's right, that's right.
So when we became closer to the students, and so when we'd get these big boxes of clothing, we'd put the men in one room with the boxes for men, and the women in another room with boxes for the women, and we used to say, try on everything, anything you want to, and whatever fits you that you like,
Oh, wonderful.
it's
What
yours.
a way to bring them together.
Yours. And
Yeah.
I could hardly wait to report to the people who had sent me the joy we had in that part of it after each concert.
So important for the people at that age to dress
That's
nice
right.
and feel good about it.
Now, the people in high government offices, including the wife of the prime minister at the time, was she couldn't buy any clothes.
Oh, so she came home?
And some friends, I think Fania Shoreham was one of these people who came to help me to find something that would be good for Mrs. Charette. And I brought a couple of garments to Mrs. Charette that were in one of these packages.
Wonderful, wonderful story.
Recently, Charette's granddaughter was at the university with her young husband doing graduate work, and I told her when she told me who she was, I said, you
Clothed her.
tell your mother that about the clothes she got from our boxes in that had to be
51.
like 51.
I think she was the nursery school teacher.
Right, she worked at Akiva Schechter, this granddaughter. Can't
That's
think of her
right.
name.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
Oh, and here, this is, you tell about this marvelous picture of in Israel.
Oh, I think that was Cornell.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do you want to show it? So just hold it up so
Yeah.
I can get a close-up of it. Right. Len, do you want to hold it up?
Sure.
Let me get a close-up.
This is his grandson.
Okay. I'll put the
He
two
didn't live to meet him or to see him, but
This is
he'd be
his
proud.
legacy.
He'd be very proud. Let me just set it down.